All right, I believe we're ready to get started. Is that good with you, Bethany and Christy?
Let's do it.
Yay. All right, we are so excited that you have chosen this Tuesday afternoon to join us in this remote learning series with Niswonger. We just want you to know that these sessions were created to provide you folks with opportunities to extend and refine some of your practices when it comes to engaging students in remote learning. We're going to showcase some high impact practices. There'll be some strategies that we model. There'll be some resources that we share in the chat box. Also, resources will be shared via the Niswonger homepage for the remote learning series, and you can go there and we'll refresh your memory on that later on in the presentation. And although a lot of these strategies and resources are applicable to in-person teaching, we are really geared right now to the virtual setting. So again, welcome to building community and relationships in a virtual setting while being developmentally responsive. My name is Brandy Wilson, along with Christy Snyder, and we are both instructional coaches through Niswonger Foundation.
Okay, welcome. Some of us are familiar with Zoom, maybe more so than you ever thought you would be. But in case you're fairly new to Zoom, we'll take just a minute and go over some of these features. First of all, along the bottom, you'll see your video and microphone options. We would love to see your faces. I know it's really weird and awkward in the online environment, but it helps to warm up this pretty sterile environment for us. So if you can do so, please turn your video on now. Also, your microphone, you have the option to be muted or to unmute. Just to keep the background noise at a minimum, we ask that you keep yourself on mute, but of course, feel free to unmute if you want to share a comment or ask a question. Speaking of questions and comments, you see this little chat bubble right here. It's kind of in the middle of your Zoom bar. And if you click that, it should open up a chat pane. Feel free at any time to chat questions, make comments using that chat feature. One other thing, when I share my screen with you, it usually forces you into full screen mode. And if that doesn't work for you, all you need to do is hit your escape button on your screen and it will exit you out of that full screen mode. Please feel free to minimize this or move this participant window in whatever way that works best for you.
Again, as you can see, I am Brandy Wilson with Christy Snyder with Niswonger Foundation. We are both instructional coaches. Again, thanks for joining us. We're happy to have you guys here with us.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. When Niswonger asked us to participate in these mini sessions, they wanted a kind of a learning arc on which that would encompass all of our sessions. And so Brandy and I decided that we would like to use a framework to make these sessions as meaningful as we possibly could. So we have chosen to use an AMLE article called This We Believe, and it's linked here on the slide so that if you go back and look at the session materials later, you'll be able to access the article. But what this article posits is that education for young adolescents should have 4 central attributes. It should be developmentally responsive, it should be challenging, it should be empowering, and it should be equitable. So these 4 weeks of mini sessions that we're going to do will expound on how each of these posits applies to virtual classrooms in regard to building community and relationships. And then toward the end of September, I think it's September 29th, we'll do a deep dive on one of these posits. And we're hoping throughout this session and maybe your evaluation that we can get some feedback on, which of these you would like for us to focus on in that deep dive. We haven't quite made our mind up about that yet. But today's session, we'll focus on supporting a developmentally responsive curriculum while building community and relationships in a virtual setting. Thank you for joining us.
Our session aims today, folks. In this session, you're going to gain an understanding of how to support virtual learning that is developmentally appropriate or responsive to your students' needs. Also, we're going to leave you with some specific strategies to build a developmentally responsive community with both your students and parents. And that's in regards to communication. And specifically today, we're going to be looking at Padlet.
Okay. So AMLE, the Association of Middle Level Education, if you haven't checked out that site, I would encourage you to do so. There is just a wealth of information there that I think you would find very meaningful. But they state that an essential attribute of successful schools is that education must be developmentally responsive. So what we as educators must do is consider where a student is in his or her development, and then make that the basis for all of our instructional decisions. Research shows us that doing so can close achievement gaps. And we know that our students are coming to us this year with arguably the biggest achievement gaps they may have ever had. So this is especially important this year. We also already know that students of all ages have specific developmental needs that we as educators have to meet. So there are many of these, but we've chosen to focus today on the developmental need of being socially active. So being socially active, is something all kids want to do, but in my opinion, it's a whole lot easier to accomplish in a traditional classroom rather than a virtual classroom. In a traditional classroom, you've got those discussions, those academic discussions, and kids are feeding off of one another. And if you are serving in a district where virtual learning is occurring in an asynchronous type of environment, that's not easy to do. So Brandy and I have options for you today. In just a minute, I gotta click again. In just a minute, Brandy and I are gonna introduce you to several strategies to help build community and relationships virtually. And then we're going to ask you to reflect in this way, what you see on the screen. So please be thinking about which of these strategies that we present that you might be able to try immediately, and then which ones you might feel more comfortable trying down the road. So on this slide, we're showing you just some very simple but yet very effective ways that you can build community and relationships virtually. And I'm not going to go over all of these. Our hope is that because we have just such a short time today, we hope that you'll go back to our website and pull up these session materials and then decide what rabbit hole you want to go down. But there's lots of information here for you. We just don't have time to present it all. But one thing I do want to bring up is just something as simple as starting class with mics unmuted is a really good way to build community and relationships if you're able to have a synchronous type of class in your district. So just giving kids that space to talk to one another, not even anything academic, just to catch up with one another and build those relationships. Scheduling a hangout. As a teacher, providing time for students just to get together virtually and talk. And I guess you're the moderator, but you really don't even have to interject, just making space for these students to connect with one another when they can't be with each other at school. And the last thing I'll mention on this slide is utilizing Google Forms. I don't know if you've ever used Google Forms. I am not very technologically literate and I can do this. I was able to do this, so I would encourage you to try it. It's really easy. But a Google form gives you the opportunity just to ask your kids some questions and to get some feedback from them. Questions like, how are you? Or how are those you care about? How do you imagine others your age are feeling at this time? Questions like that create space for students to connect with you. And on this slide, it will be available in the session materials. We've provided an example student form for you, and Brandy is going to drop the link to that in the chat so you could look at it now rather than later. But that's something that you could take and you could make a copy of it. It will force you to make a copy, and you could edit it to suit your needs, you know, make it your own. We hope you'll use that. Then next we'll talk about more advanced options for building community and relationships virtually. Not that they're harder, they're just more technology involved with these. Again, I'm not going to go over all these. We hope you'll explore them later. But one I do want to mention is Screencastify as a way of building community and relationships virtually. Screencastify is a free screen recorder through Chrome. With it, you can guide students through an outline of a lesson and create short instructional videos. So even if you're not able to have class in a synchronous environment, students are still seeing your face and they're still hearing your voice. And this helps to create an environment where students feel comfortable learning new things. And then if you could kind of get in the habit of doing that, of presenting your lessons that way, would also create structure for students, which is another one of their developmental needs. The last one I'll go ahead and mention on this slide is Padlet. Padlet is a virtual bulletin board where students can post audio, text, or video. Students can comment on their classmates' ideas, and a discussion can occur in real time as students participate from their own computers. So that's pretty cool. And I think with Padlet, you get maybe 3 free Padlets, and then there might be a small cost, but it's not expensive at all. So as promised, here's this reflection. We would like to ask you to reflect, because as this quote says, this is how we learn best. We don't learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on our experience. So we'd like you to consider which of those strategies, and I know I flew through them, but which of those strategies you would feel comfortable using maybe, you know, really quickly, like in the next 2 hours or the next 2 days? Or which ones do you feel like maybe are a heavier lift and you might need more time to accomplish that over the next 2 weeks or the next 2 months? We would invite you to share either by unmuting, or you're welcome to drop your response into the chat box. We'll have about 30 seconds to do that. Oh, and I forgot, it gives you a count.
Christy, is there a way to go back to
Yes.
the slide that had the, there we go, some of our strategies?
I like that response, Christy, and I'm excited to share some more information on Padlet and just how versatile it is for your students to be able to respond.
Oh, flip it back to the first one too. There are just some simple things listed here.
Christy, I'll share when I see the one that says schedule a hangout. my son's school system started back last Friday and on into this week, but they've scheduled a little time each morning where the kids can just hop on, and it's not as structured. It's not about academics all up in your face. It's just a chance to sometimes play just a silly game, or just to talk about, stuff like what's something you saw on TV or just something you're reading. So my son's enjoyed that. They've only done it twice, but each day he's talked about how he enjoyed just getting to see his friends and chat about this, that, and the other.
I think it would help my own students are virtual learners my own children are virtual learners this year, and that would go a long way in helping them. They're not feeling very connected because that's not happening in their district.
And he's a 7th grader and a boy. So if he finds it, interesting and is open enough to tell me,
oh yeah,
really,
that's big.
Got to be worth something.
Absolutely, yeah.
To echo on that, I think we forget how kids' bathroom breaks and hall transitions during class transitions, how they get those few moments to speak with one another, and they don't have that any longer. So just that time to almost be a facilitator and allow them to hang out and just monitor, content coming in, but just that freedom for them to have that hangout time with their friends is huge.
I agree. All right. Anything else from the chat we want to talk about?
John had said he'd used Padlet in the past, and the kids have absolutely loved it. And I, want to echo that, John, and say, yes, I've used it at the elementary level, the middle school level. I've used it with college level students. They have all actually given feedback about how fun it was. And especially the college students loved how they could asynchronously respond and still feel part of the class when it was an online class.
All righty.
All right, folks. Christy referenced earlier the need for students to be socially active. And before the pandemic, I know that so many of us as educators relied on classroom discussions and student discourse around our standards or subject or topic that we were teaching to check for understanding, so possibly to formatively assess. Maybe it was a tool you use to promote classroom relationships and build that community. And maybe even it was for you to establish norms for how your students were going to interact and share ideas. So we know there is value in peer conversations, and we do not want them to be lost during virtual learning, especially for those students that are going to be participating asynchronously. We feel that Padlet is a great tool and one solution to this possible problem or issue. On the next slide, as you can see, Padlet is our platform for discussion today. And I know that if you were to get on Google and search for ways to connect with students online, there would be a plethora of platforms that would come about. And so with the array of platforms, why did we choose Padlet? Well, Padlet is a virtual bulletin board where teachers and students can collaborate. Teachers can collaborate with one another, within faculty. They can collaborate with parents or families. Students can collaborate in a class setting with teacher or just among themselves in maybe a board that the teacher has set up. Also, with Padlet, I love that it is developmentally appropriate in that students are used to seeing an actual bulletin board in the classroom regardless of their access to online. And I think that's huge. But also, since it is an online platform, it ties in closely and relates to social media responses. And I think for that very reason, it's interesting to students because of its familiarity. When responding on tablet, you can add, or Padlet, I'm sorry, you can add text, images, or multimedia. Multimedia, it could be a drawing, it could be a voice recording or a video. You can pull a GIF or a meme from online. And I will say, as an educator, that having that online access and that freedom for students to be able to post whatever their heart desires or record whatever message they would like to record, that brings about a little fear and anxiety in me. And I'm assuming it would you folks as well. So thankfully, Padlet has content filtering there. They have a moderator approval feature in which before anything goes live online, you can approve or disapprove their comments or video or any content that's coming through. And it also has a profanity filter that censors any vulgar language that's coming through. So that puts my teacher educator heart at ease, and I hope it does yours as well. In terms of accessibility, Padlet is available across all devices, including your personal and school devices. That includes tablets, phones, desktops, laptops. It offers asynchronous opportunities as well as synchronous opportunities, and that allows students to revisit content. They're able to go back and use it as a study session, or asynchronously as they weren't available for the online class. So they're able to go back and view what was done within the lesson among the teachers and students. Also, they may want to look back just for clarification, as I often would like to do. And so that's why I love that Zoom even has that capability for our meetings, so we can share that with you folks, as 30 minutes is a very short time for a lot of information to be shared. It can be used as a formative assessment tool. You're able to gauge understanding based on the discussions that students post. And also, it's accommodating to students' needs, and that those students that may have writing or processing challenges, they don't have to respond with a long essay or a long written response. They can use a photo or record their voice. So that access to them is very modified, because not only is it available to everyone, it's not just going to call them out because it is available to everyone, excuse me. So they feel that freedom in responding however they're most comfortable. And to offer a little more insight into this tool, we are going to watch a video, and in this short video, they reference Padlet as a collaboration platform. And Christy will begin that now.
In the past, collaboration among students was limited to group time. Well, with the exception of a past note or two. But nowadays, the exchange of ideas isn't limited to classroom time. Teamwork can happen on a whole new level, a virtual one. There are so many digital tools that allow students to record, organize, and share their ideas both inside and outside of school. And these tools can be used in lots of cool ways. One tool that fosters this type of anytime, anywhere collaboration is Padlet. Imagine a digital sticky note tool that allows your students to add text, images, and even multimedia to a shared board. Students don't even need a login to use it, though you might want to create an account for yourself so that you can store all the boards you or your students build in one place. From your lessons hook to the wrap-up, Padlet can help you host a virtual discussion group, pose a question for an exit ticket, or collect student work. By providing a shared space for group project planning, students can ask questions, organize materials, suggest resources, and discuss what they've learned with each other. You can also add suggestions and comments to their boards to help prod their thinking. This just-in-time way to collaborate is so valuable. All of your students, from the vocal ones to the quiet ones, can have a voice on Padlet by contributing to their group's work. Like what you see? Check out the innovative ways teachers are using Lino, Today's Meet, and Google Docs. Try out collaboration tools to enrich your instruction and further your students' learning.
In reflection of that video content, I really like how the narrator coined Padlet as a just-in-time way to collaborate. Now, though Padlet has been around before the pandemic, it's become even more widely used and a more accessed tool because of its versatility and the ability that it has for asynchronous and synchronous environments. The narrator left us with a few ideas on how we could even incorporate Padlet into the classroom and into some of your future lesson plans. And I loved how Padlet's accessibility was noted when she said it could be used anytime, anywhere, and as we mentioned before, on any device. The narrator also highlighted how it was a shared space and offered availability for teamwork within your classroom, which sometimes virtually, especially if you're using Google Meet, is hard to allow students to meet in groups. Again, being used in either a synchronous or asynchronous environment, Padlet is accessible. And I also appreciate the structure that this tool offers, because students are able to organize or record their content. And I think that is huge, because they're used to having that structure in the classroom offered by the teacher, and it can be offered in this way. If Christy will go to the next slide, we would love for you to practice Padlet. Bethany or Christy will put the Padlet link in the chat box, so you're going to be able to access the Padlet link there. So just know that you can pull that up by pushing the chat bubble at the bottom of your screen. And you will see what Christy is showing now. Now, as you log on, you will see that you do not have to have an account. Only Christy or myself do as the teachers. And there's a question up here which we'll go over, but when you do respond, we would like you to respond under what grade band that you are teaching. And note that there are some sample responses to the side. It's a video response that you can play starring yours truly. And there is also a first grader response who she recorded her answer to the question. So just her voice. So here's what we would like you to respond to. What do students need most to make the virtual classroom successful according to their developmental needs? We would love for you to click the plus sign, and Christy, if you'll do that for them now, they can see the options and how they can respond. And we would like you to respond in two ways. If you notice the three dots on the side, when you click those three dots, it gives you the options on uploading a file, linking a URL, Google search, take a picture of yourself, do a voice recording, a drawing, or a screen recording. Any of those options, we would love for you to choose two. Again, you can see there in the chat box that Bethany has linked the Padlet for you. And we're going to start a timer and give you about 1 minute to respond. And I will start the timer now. Notice, guys, as you're responding, if you've never used Padlet before, you're able to see other students' responses in real time, or for our sake, participant responses in real time. Thank you, Christy, for continuing to, let's stop that timer, for continuing to refresh so we can see everyone's responses. I love that students need differentiation and scaffolding to meet their individual needs. I think depending on how you use Padlet, there's multiple ways in which you can use it, and that would be an awesome resource in scaffolding content for students. I also see the response time with others. Students need time with each other and the teacher for both academic conversation and collaboration, as well as just friendly chatter. I think it is huge that students know that they are part of something bigger than just the education system. And I think we could agree that most times students are going to learn from people that they like more so than if they didn't. So I think that that is pertinent to being a teacher, is being able to share that discourse just about life and family rather than strictly education.
Can we take just a minute and show these examples?
Sure.
Just because I
showcase that star, Christy.
That's right.
I said students need time to process content and instruction through discussion with their peers.
Well, how am I going to do that? Oops.
Just scroll down on that link. There you go.
I think teachers should let kids have time to chat with other kids and let kids chat with them and let them make new friends and see if they can make new friends. Because they're in a new class with new kids.
That was just too cute not to share. I had to share it.
Well, and then that's a first grader's perspective. So notice how, and I allowed her to do that on her own. So it is accessible to even your younger folks.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. If you'll look at the screenshots there, you'll see here is a Padlet timeline. There is also a daily vocabulary discussion there where students respond with their own definitions to a vocabulary word or maybe even sentences. And the other picture is showcasing pen pals.
All right. So we're coming to the end of our session now. It seems that we need social connections now more than ever before. For students with the developmental desire to fit in and seek connection with each other, that statement is even more prophetic than for adults. The need to maintain academic instruction and then to be socially connected collide when considering how we help our students connect when they can't see each other in person. And how we do this is probably going to change shape over the coming days and maybe many times. But we are helped with this by, first of all, remaining positive, remembering that there is good in everything. You know, you may have to look hard to find it, but there is good in everything. And also by considering what we know of our students developmentally, and then by responding appropriately to those needs. So throughout this presentation, our intention has been to showcase multiple digital tools that you could use to build developmentally responsive communities and relationships. And before we end, we're going to share just one more with you very quickly. You're going to use something called Answer Garden to respond to these wrap-up questions. And you may want to go ahead and just snap a picture of these questions so that you will have them when you get switched over to the Answer Garden. Brandy is going to drop a link. Brandy or Bethany one will drop a link to this Answer Garden in the chat for you. And then you're going to have 1 minute to respond to these two questions and make our garden grow. So we're asking you to picture your virtual learners and what's one way you're going to commit to supporting them that is developmentally responsive to their needs. Or you could choose to answer this question. We're going to give you some choice. What is a specific strategy for building a developmentally responsive community and relationships with both students and parents in regard to communication that you will utilize? I'm going to try to move my tool out of the way here and get this. Whoops, don't look at that yet. So sorry. Uh-oh. So sorry. Well, Bethany, did you get the link? Because I can't.
It's in the chat box.
It is, so they can go.
Yes.
I want to show it, but I can't. Maybe I can just do this. So as you respond, these answers will start popping up. Some time for discussion, talk time, giving platforms for sharing, social time, low stakes gathering like those hangouts. One thing that's really cool about Answer Garden is if the answers are repeated, that word grows bigger. So it kind of gives you a visual of, you know, how many people are sharing the same response. So those are getting bigger. Okay. Go back to this. All right, just one more plug for our learning arc. We hope that you will join us for our next 3 sessions on building community and relationships in a virtual setting by being challenging, empowering, and equitable. And then for our deep dive at the end of September. Remember that you can access our session materials on our website. And you know, there are lots of materials there for you. And Brandy, I'll turn it back over to you.
We want to thank you guys so much for taking time out of your Tuesday afternoon to attend this remote learning series session. We're always looking for ways to improve, so we would love for you to share your reflective thoughts. We would love to hear your insights about future potential topics that we can cover and offer for professional learning sessions. So right now you'll see in the chat that an evaluation link will be left. And if you'll click on that and do a short, quick evaluation, we would so appreciate your feedback.
I know some of you may be completing that evaluation, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. This does mark the end of our presentation. Please feel free to sign off if you need to, or you're welcome to stay on with us for a continued conversation about building community and relationships in regard to being developmentally responsive. In this conversation, we want to focus on what's within your sphere of control and what we can do to best support each other and our students. We also want this conversation to be action-oriented and practical. We want to give you space to share what's working well for you in regard to building community and relationships, whether that's, you know, virtually or in your traditional classroom at this point, and then what isn't working. You're welcome to share resources that you have, as well as insights about what else you would like to learn or have addressed in future sessions. And we've got some guiding questions to get us started.
And to piggyback on what Christy said about sharing resources, let's be transparent here as teachers. We like to steal, right? So share those resources within this community and help your fellow educator out. We've got some guiding questions to kick off this continued conversation. And we just want to start with this. Adults often underestimate how important it is for those students to maintain a connection with each other. Just how we stated earlier in the presentation, especially regarding those low stake times during classroom transitions, lunch, and even bathroom breaks. So speaking to that, what evidence have you seen of this in your own classroom? We would love some feedback. You can choose to unmute yourself and answer that question with us conversationally, or feel free to do so in the chat. So again, what evidence have you seen of that importance of maintaining a connection between the students in your own classroom?
And we can be much more informal now, right?
Yes.
Right. So guys,
Yeah.
if you're hanging on, this is just the extra at the end. So feel free to unmute, no pressure. It's just a networking time.
And I'll start this, just like Bethany shared about her personal children. With my first grader, she was so sad because their first Google Meet that they had together, she wasn't able to talk to her friends because she took it to heart and that logical way of thinking that she could not unmute herself. And so she saw a couple of her little best friends in there and was so sad when we completed the first Meet session that she couldn't talk to them. She wanted to say hi to Zoe and Tatum, and she wasn't allowed to. And that was her reflection on the Google Meet. How did it go? And that was her reflection. I couldn't talk to my friends.
It's hard.
So not my personal classroom, but definitely personal enough to share as it is my daughter.
Well, I know, and when I was in the classroom, you know, I always want them to be quiet and I want them to be, you know, doing exactly what I asked them to do. And I didn't really build in time for them to just talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. Now we built in time for academic conversations, and I know that's really important, but now that a lot of virtual learners are not getting that time in the hallway or even in the cafeteria to talk with one another, it's, I just think it's really super important that they get that another way.
We've just got to remember the importance of that social emotional learning piece and how crucial it is to students' development, especially with building that community in the classroom. Because again, like we referenced earlier, as a person, if I go to a professional development or a professional learning series, I'm going to respond better to someone that I like and enjoy and that I feel is kind, just as students will too. So as one of the participants had answered earlier, that it's important for student-to-student conversations as well as teachers to interact with those students.
I'm curious what instructional strategies or other platforms outside of Padlet or Answer Garden that we saw today folks are using. I know I see Gina and Lauren still hanging on with us. So if you feel comfortable enough to share, or we can just chit chat too about what else we've seen, Brandy and Christy, teachers use in our work supporting classrooms within rural life at the Nice Longer Foundation.
The wait time in Zoom seems like forever.
It is an infinity. Ladies, do either of you have a platform that you use other than possibly Google Classroom or Canvas that you interact with students online?
One thing that Bethany mentioned yesterday that I thought was a really cool idea are book studies. I think that would be a really great way to incorporate, facilitate some connection between kids. And those would be pretty easy to do virtually. Even just starting a chat group in your classroom.
I've heard a teacher talking about students not having the best internet access and using platforms such as like free conference call, where it's just a phone number. And so, you know, a lot of kids have at least a parent who has a phone. And if there's a way, you know, that they could connect with each other that way, they can't see each other. So I know that kind of takes away some of the relationship, you know, just that kind of interpersonal aspect. But, you know, push comes to shove, I think offering some way for folks to connect, even if it's just on a phone call.
Yeah, going old school. I like that.
Yeah, and in that regard, you can have a lot of people on a phone call. Again, it's a little trickier, and you might end up talking over each other just a little bit, but again, better than nothing maybe.
I also think, speaking of old school, even snail mail, those postcards that, that's kind of a lost art, those postcards to welcome students to your class. And I just think that in itself is a nice way to build that connection, even though we're online virtually, to get that snail mail. Like my daughter would be so excited to have mail addressed directly to her and only her.
And then, of course, in Zoom and even I know in Teams, Microsoft Teams, you're able to do these virtual breakout rooms where students could collaborate in small groups, even virtually. That's a little scary because you may not know what's going on in there, but you can pop in and out of those rooms. So that's another way.
You hinted a little bit, Brandy, at teachers sending postcards to students, kind of that teacher to student, which also then probably takes into consideration the parent who's checking the mail. But I wonder if are there any ways we could build community with parents at this time? I'd be curious if anybody's worked with any schools that are taking that into account, or if Lauren wants to add on what her school might be doing.
One thing that we is in the presentation, but that we did not go over is teachers sending texts to parents, and in the text maybe offering a literacy strategy and then telling the parent, just a real quick way that they could support that literacy strategy. Maybe it's something they're working on in their virtual classroom, but just a little piece of encouragement and a little support to parents who are at home trying to help their kids in their classrooms. And we linked the article in this presentation. It's a pretty interesting read.
Yes, Lauren, the Remind app for your parents to communicate and see what they may need, that is a widely used tool. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad it's effective for you. I know Class Dojo is also right there alongside Remind. I know a school that I work with uses Band to do parent and group communication.
As a parent, I feel like Remind is a lifeline for me with my own children. Absolutely.
Me too.
And I just feel if we're talking just middle school, well, I mean, let's be real here. Even elementary kids, like when they come home, their most important part of the day is going outside and playing and what they had for lunch. So sometimes you don't get the information you need. So a quick, accessible way to communicate with a teacher is huge, especially where you don't feel like you're infringing upon their time with their family. Oh, Lauren, I see that. Difficulty communicating with families that don't speak English.
I learned summer as part of the Virtual Summer Institute. I attended one of Aaron Wood's session on Google resources, and I didn't realize how much within some of the Google apps, if you will, like Google Docs, that kind of thing, Google Slides, that there's that translator feature. And he said, at his school, he's an assistant principal, that they'll drop, communication in and let Google translate it, and then they'll copy and paste it into some of these other platforms. So I'm just wondering if there would be a way to say, okay, I want to send this message to the Remind app, stick it in a Google Doc, let Google translate it for you, and then copy and paste it back over into one of those other platforms. Might be something that seems, at least on the surface to me right now, fairly simple way to kind of address that. But one other thing I was thinking about from my time as an administrator is when we used to do those little we did lunch and learns where we would, like parents could bring their lunch or, but I wonder now virtually kind of similarly, just to do like a teacher to hop on and do a quick, 10 to 15 minute recording showing parents how to do something, with their student, or how to engage in some kind of resource that the students have been given. especially with our little, kindergarten, first and second graders, as they're doing, working through some different resources, that could be kind of handy. And what a neat way to build community.
Lauren, I put the link to the Virtual Summer Institute in the chat box if you want to click on that to be able to look up and search for yourself what Bethany was talking about with the Google, and maybe you can see some other tools that would help. And I would also like to piggyback on what Bethany was saying when it came to those gatherings with parents. When I taught math for a very brief time, one of the things that parents would always reach out to me for was an opportunity to just gather together and talk about math verbiage and the new terms that we're using for math. So just those opportunities, it was a chance for them to learn and be able to help their students at home. And again, that's not something that we can do in a brick and mortar situation right now in a traditional classroom, but we could offer that virtually to parents, parent open house or a parent open forum where questions can be asked. You do want to have some structure to that though, because it could also turn quickly into a gripe session. So that's needs to be considered in your planning.
Well, ladies, do we want to go ahead and wrap it up? Lauren, you're more than welcome to hang on or ask some additional questions. But as we wrap up our last few minutes here, we'll give Lauren a chance to chat if she's got anything else she wants to discuss.
We appreciate you, Lauren.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hopefully we'll see you at some future sessions. And a reminder, all of these sessions are being recorded and materials will be posted on the Remote Learning Series website. All right, ladies, you ready to wrap it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Oh, Lauren, I can't imagine that. That is a difficult task. Teaching virtually is difficult in and of itself. And then also doing that across K-5 grade band in a CDC classroom. We are rooting for you.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think about something that would be practical kind of in that space. Lauren, do you have a particular parent need other than the communication one you talked about with regard to ELL or ESL students? I know, again, when I was an administrator, our CDC teachers worked a lot with parents on modeling, showing parents how to work with their students to do particular skills, develop skills in that way. So I'm still kind of back at that option to maybe video myself as the teacher modeling how I might do something so that parent could then watch it over and over and over again if needed, as being a possible resource. But
I think that's good because in that situation, if you just say, go over flashcards with your student, how would you do that? What prompts would you give them? What structures are there? What supports? And what scaffolding do you offer them? And just modeling that as parents work with their students, but they're not in a teacher state of mind.
And I know some school systems are offering some other support services virtually. Sounds kind of crazy, but physical therapy, how do you do that virtually? Or how do you do occupational therapy or speech therapy? But they're getting kind of creative. Like, how could I, if I'm the parent and, my daughter is here and the physical therapist or occupational speech therapist is on the other side, are they able to walk me through how I might do something in the physical therapy world? Or we could, have some materials and they're talking with me about how I might use those materials with my child in an educational way, or to build a certain subset of skills that are part of their therapy goals and objectives. So, I mean, not ideal, but given the situation, maybe better than nothing, for sure. Oh, Lauren says, what's she doing? Mm-hmm.
Right.
How creative, task bundles. And having Google Meets to teach them how to use it. Awesome.
I love that you have a plan, Lauren.
Yeah, and I think sometimes these types of situations, like a pandemic that's forced us all to do everything virtually, also maybe, silver lining leads us to think of new and creative ways to interact with each other, our students, our parents. And it sounds like, Lauren, you are already there. Thinking
And I
of
hope that there's someone that you can reach out to, maybe within your district, or someone that is in a nearby district, and maybe ideas on what they're doing. There's so much merit in that professional learning environment there, and just sharing ideas among one another.
For sure.
And just a reminder that you're not a lone ranger. I mean, if anything, we get in that classroom and we're all on our own for so much of the day, and now we're at home. Or if you're at school, as the county I'm in, the teachers have to be at school and they're social distancing. So again, a lone ranger.
Mm-hmm. That networking piece is important for sure. All righty, Lauren. Well, we thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And
yes, thank you.
And Randy for facilitating a wonderful session. All right, at this point, we will sign out.
Right. Have a wonderful
Enjoy your evening.